guest today is Leela Corman. Leela is a painter, graphic novel creator, and educator. She's the creator of numerous works of autobiographical and fictional comics, including the graphic novels Victory Parade and Unterzakhn, as well as the short comics collection We All Wish for Deadly Force. Her graphic novel Victory Parade has been nominated for 3 Eisner Awards, was rewarded Le Prix Artemisia in France, and was named one of the best graphic novels of 2024 by The Washington Post, NPR Books, Publishers Weekly, The Guardian, and The Comics Journal. She's created album art for the Mountain Goats and tour poster art for Live Skull, Talia Zedek Band, and Nico Case. She's also the founding instructor at the Sequential Arts Workshop, teaches at Rhode Island School of Art Design, has been a belly dancer, the host of the radio show Ecstasy the Frenzy, a singer in a Brian Eno cover band, and the curator of the music documentary series Sight and Sound in Gainesville, Florida. She's the former singer in the Stella Splendors and currently sings in the Providence-based feminist surrealist noise rock band Insomnies. And she currently lives in Providence, Rhode Island with her family. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome the Revolutions Per Movie, Leela Corman. Hi, Leela.
Hi, Chris. How are you doing?
I'm doing great now that I see you. I mean, we've been planning this for a long time, and you've picked The Forbidden Zone, which is one of the most requested films I've had ever since I started the show. It's just been sitting there in the atmosphere waiting for someone to pluck it. This film will have so much to talk about. I'm going to talk to you about transgressive art and your influences from that. I have you here, and I got to ask about creating long-form work, such as Victory Parade, because I'm a very hyper person. I move really fast. Doing something like that, where I know that the initial idea of the book came in 2013, and then you have to do a book pitch, and you have editors, and you do the research, and you're very painterly with your work. How do you come to terms with knowing that this is going to be such a long project, like 10 years? Is that comforting to you? Is it frustrating? Or is it just the way it is?
That's a really good question. 10 years from initial spark to delivery of the final files of the book.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't start actually drawing it until the end of 2016. That's when I started actually doing the research in earnest. Before that, so ideas will come with a single image and then kind of percolate in the back of my head for big projects like that. And often it's kind of unwelcome, like, oh crap, I got to do a book now. That happened with this idea that I had while I was working on Victory Parade for the third book. And I was like, okay, God damn it. It's a trilogy and crap. God damn it. I was sitting in a cafe in Berlin, which sounds really pretentious, but that's what I was doing.
It's allowed. I'll allow it.
Right? I was doing the most depressing research in Berlin, going to book involved to marinate in it, basically. And then I was sitting in this really nice cafe in Berlin the next day, and I started kind of thinking about the Cold War and growing up during the Cold War, like at the tail end of it. And that's when I was like, oh, crap, that's a book. So that book hasn't come into being yet. Precisely because I don't think I can sit at a drafting table for 7 years again. I don't think I can do that again, at least not now. But I will say with the past 2 projects, Unterzakhn, the book that came before Victory Parade, also took quite a long time. I think part of the long time, it has to do with practical stuff. I was a working illustrator while I was working on both of those books, which I'm not. And I was also a working belly dancer while I was doing Unterzakhn and some of Victory Parade. And I was also raising a kid. In between Unterzakhn and Victory Parade, my first child died. Mm-hmm. So that was a whole other set of things that I had to kind of weather as a person. So all these things are happening, as you know, life happens while you're working on things too.
Yeah, we've been talking about that off air. We've been going through stuff. So
yeah, and as I'm sure a lot of the listeners are too, you just, if you're not going through something now, you're about to be probably. So
yes,
that's That's me doing what I usually do, which is like being a bat that descends from the rafters and reminds people of these things. uh, but it was a joy to work on Victory Parade in a lot of ways. As dark as the book is, I know that sounds weird, like well, I should say it was a joy because working on a really immersive project is a joy. However, it also really took a toll on my mental health and probably my physical health too. While I was working on it, Einstürzende Neubauten put out their album Lament, and that became a really important piece of art in my studio. There was a period during which I felt like I wasn't really working until that album was on in my workspace. And
Wow.
and actually like that kind of was like it coincided with the pivot in my career where I started doing watercolor comics, and that was like when I started doing that, the portal between life and death opened.
Right.
Well, so that album did something that I was hoping to do with Victory Parade. But while I was just kind of embarking on the process of thinking about that book, I read this interview with Blixa Bargeld where he talked about working on Lament. And he said, I'll paraphrase it, he said something about how spending all that time working on a project about the First World War took a toll on him and kind of on his family as well, because it's such a depressing subject. Kind of similar with Victory Parade. I was immersed in this kind of bloody death world a lot of the time with these really angry characters or very stressed out characters who are doing things that they would normally not be doing under the pressures of war and trauma. And then, it was like I was making a book about individuals processing collective trauma while we were processing multiple collective traumas, like rolling.
I don't even know some of this is going to be naive. Do you know where everything is going before you start? Or like even at the end, you're like, I didn't know it was going to be this.
It's that one. It's the latter. And that's not a naive question to ask at
Okay.
all. No, it's my writing process is totally maddening. Because I write like I was trained as a painter. And when you train as a painter, you're trained to work all over the canvas all the time. Like you don't focus on one area and then move on to the next one.
Mm-hmm.
And not a great way to write. I just feel like I'm like flailing and fumbling until the story starts to take shape.
Wow. You would never know. That's
That's good.
amazing.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'm really happy to hear that.
Yeah. Because the thing that also intimidates me when I see you mentioned you work in watercolor with this. There's that amazing panel of that's the correct word, right? Panel? Did I use
Yeah.
the right? Okay, cool. Of George lying in the bed and the red ink coming out of his ear, and I
Mm-hmm.
was like, "This is a beautiful, powerful image. What if the flow of what you're trying to do? Like, how do you control that? I mean, I'd be so scared
Mm.
to do that because of not knowing the parameters of where it's going to stop bleeding out into your image."
You know what's interesting about watercolor? That it's the noise guitar of paint. It's
Okay. Makes
it's
total
controlling,
sense.
right? I mean,
Yes.
I'm not a guitar player at all. Like I'm in awe of people who play musical instruments. I mean, this is like a non-guitarist talking about this, right? But I think about just the experience of listening to noisy music.
Hmm.
It feels to me, and watching my bandmate play. I'm in a band with a very, very noisy guitar player.
Yes, you are.
Yes, Hillary Jones, riff machine.
Yeah.
She's amazing. Uh, she's marshaling all of this chaos into this controlled set of, it's like this very contained area of sound. You're sort of doing something similar with watercolor. And there's an amazing quote from a watercolor painter in the mid 20th century that I saw on a wall at MoMA, took a photo of 7 years ago, and now I can't find it. But it's sort of saying something similar without the rock component, talking about the marshaling of chaos. It's dirt suspended in water, it's mineral pigment or whatever it is suspended in water. And there's a careful balance of control and release in it. Like you relinquish some of that control. Um, so I don't know if that is analogous at all to playing music in any way. but just like I said, as a listener, it feels like it's related. Well, also, just to speak technically, for something like that panel you're talking about, where there's that drip of red paint coming out of the man's ear and dripping down his pillow, I'm using a very specific amount of water. I know exactly how much water to use to kind of make a puddle that's going to be the right shape that I want approximately. And if there's a lot of liquid on the page, I'll just lay it flat. Sometimes if I have a ton of it, like there's pages in that book that are like lacquered with ink and paint. The ones where you see a sort of a black and kind of ghostly blue texture are huge puddles of black ink that I dripped this iridescent liquid acrylic into. And for that kind of thing, I can't sit on a slanted drafting board, so I just lay it on top of the radiator. Just like in the winter, this works really well.
That's
I've also had
amazing.
experiences where like I've had to deal with stuff dripping and spilling in ways that I didn't want, like not in Victory Parade, but I think I sent you a copy of the nonfiction book, right?
Yes.
I guess. So in the story about the band Come,
Yes. That was
there's
great.
thank you. That was really fun to do. That was the last nonfiction piece I did.
The band you're in and the art you make, and then like Come, Live Skull, Cody. Like, I was mentioning that stuff to you, and you're like, oh, those are my three favorite bands or whatever.
Yeah, I think that might have been, I don't know if that was the last Resonance column on Bandcamp. That was like, it ran and then the next day Bandcamp got sold to, I forget if it was the first or the second time they got bought out. So I'm not sure if that column still exists, but I was so excited when I heard about it because I was like, yeah, I wanted to make comics about music for so long.
No, it's weird to think like, oh, is it the second time Bandcamp got bought out? It's just like, oh yeah, right. When everyone was like, I'll never sell. It's just
Uh,
like, yeah.
I don't know. That sounds like me and my husband walking around Williamsburg in 2002 and him turning to me and saying, this neighborhood's never going to gentrify because this housing stock is like really like these buildings are not in good shape.
That's right. I wanted to ask you about your use of the Busby Berkeley imagery in it, because it's a great comic moment in a very intense book. But when what's his name, Eugene Palais?
Eugene Palette.
Yes, his disembodied head starts floating above Eleanor, this young girl, after she's seen the movie and she wakes up from this nightmare. I was like, wow, there's floating heads in Forbidden Zone, so maybe there's a
Yeah,
tribute.
I never made the connection. You're right. And the end of the Gangs All Here, the movie that they see in Victory Parade, does end with all the actors floating heads. So you see Eugene Pellet, you see my God, I'm picking on that great Charlotte Greenwood, all of this like character actors from the time.
Just really weird.
That movie is amazing. It's so hallucinatory and bonkers. Like there's a scene where the focus of the scene is the two people in the front seat of the car, who I think are like the really boring protagonist couple who are completely uninteresting to the plot, but their romance is supposed to be like the follow plot in the movie. And in the backseat is Carmen Miranda, and because she's not in the spotlight, she doesn't know what to do with herself. So you see her face, and she's making all these crazy Carmen Miranda faces. She has no lines. She's just kind of like mugging in the backseat in a very deranged way. But yeah, I drew that scene, and then I was showing it to a couple of friends of mine, and one of them was like, Eugene Pallet, like this is totally appropriate because he had really atrocious fascist politics, which I did not follow up and research. But
Uh-huh.
Okay,
It was
good.
meant to be.
Yeah, he's the figure in the nightmare that this kid is having, where she process all the stuff the adults aren't talking about.
Yes. I have friends that are in your field, and I know that a lot of them, the editing process is getting tricky with like sensitivity readers and, like people making sure that things are factually correct. Have you noticed a change in the publishing world for the kind of work you're doing since you made your first work?
I haven't,
Okay.
but I think that might in part be because I was making books about Jewish New York culture in the 20th century for a Jewish book imprint in New
Hmm.
York, and it was all very like culturally sort of on the same page. So, no, what happened in the editing process of Victory Parade was, there'd be the occasional like fact check, which I really appreciated. Like, I tried to slip in a little Isaac Bashevis Singer reference, and have one of the characters say, um, my family is in Frampol, which is a town that shows up in some of his short stories. And my editor, who was like the editor of Shockin for decades, was like, Frampol was bombed in, I don't know, the year, whatever, 2 years prior to the year that this scene takes place. I'm like, okay, all right, thank you.
Noted.
Exactly. Um, I would say the editing tug of war with this book was that I am not subtle sometimes, and my editor was, I think, a bit scandalized by some of the things. And I say this with love because she was the most amazing editor. She's retired from Shocking. And she was a hard ass about some things that I needed, like, I needed to talk about the structure of the book and whether it was working or not with someone who wasn't completely convinced. And she was that person for me sometimes. Um, but the thing that she really hated was she hated the Busby Berkeley death scenes
Oh, wow.
and some of the really explicit concentration camp stuff. There was a little note about like a worry that this would give ammunition to Holocaust deniers and neo Nazis. She didn't say
Wow.
neo Nazis. I was thinking about that when she said it, and I was like, I'm not here to make any of those people comfortable. I'm not here to make anybody comfortable with my art.
So, how did they wrap their head around it in the end? Do you have to go to the mat for it, or how does that work?
I mean, she was very on my side and really championed the book and my work in general. So she just wanted the book to be as good as it could be. So when I really stood up for something, she was like, okay, if that's, you're the artist, basically, to her credit. But when we were having this meeting kind of about the whole manuscript a few years into my working on it, and at one point she said, okay, now let's talk about those, what did she say, like the dancing corpses or something like that. And I just cut the whole thing off and I said, that's my favorite thing I've ever drawn.
Right.
I'm not sure it is, but I think it's probably the only truly transgressive thing I've ever drawn. Um, and I want to talk about transgressive art too, because it's an interesting topic for me. But before that, I feel like I didn't fully answer your question about sensitivity.
Hmm.
And I think that the reason why it hasn't been a problem is because it's something that I'm on board with. So, like, if I were ever to make another book, and that's an if, I would want that. I would appreciate having a sensitivity reader because I think that I don't like generalizing about generations, but I do think that you and I came up in a time when the highest value in at least our subculture was to be as transgressive as you could be,
Absolutely.
right? Like, and not for shock value always, but just because sometimes to make a point. And I know that this has been sort of reductively looked at in retrospect as just analog shit posting, basically. But
Right.
I don't think it was. A lot of it was really like art that came out of people who grew up in the Reagan era and the era of the AIDS plague, just being furious with being gaslit all the time.
Absolutely. I mean, there was a real fear and anger in that time. And it was, I just made a short list of things that I was growing up with that I didn't even know it was transgressive. These were, I saw Joanna Went and Demond Gaulis and Lydia Lunch. I saw Annie Sprinkle, Carolina Rainbow, Survival Research Laboratories, Butthole Surfers. Then I was discovering like Pasolini films and, weird X-rated cult films like Thundercrack. And then you have like John Waters and Robert Crumb, the Residents making albums like Third Reich and Roll. Then you had like cartoonists like Joe Matt and Julie Douchet and Big Black's Song About Fucking. It would just show up in a record store. You'd be like, fine. It was just part of what I was surrounded with in terms of art. And even here, I was I was very lucky. I discovered Raw magazine as like a preteen. I was really into it. I was like, I could buy this magazine here, for $5,
Oh, that's
or
such a great too.
or Suko's,
Oh,
how
yeah.
to commit suicide in South Africa. But what was funny is in one of the Raw magazines, they had a piece of work by Pascal Duret, and
Really?
it was called Theater Deathhead. And in the Raw magazine, they had cut out all of the genitalia in the magazine. And you had to send away for a sticker card with all of it. And here it is. My
Oh my
parents,
God.
my parents, because I was under 18, had to photograph their ID and send away for it. And so all these drawn weird, like it looks like woodcut erections. Yeah, they did it. And so I
Jeez.
was like, yeah, this is fine. But like if my 14-year-old was coming to me like, hey, there's this magazine I like, and there's like these drawings of, erect penises I'd like you to send away for so I can have the complete set. It was like, it just fit into my conversation. So I'm really fascinated because the film Forbidden Zone, it's such a beloved film, but it's also a film that people really struggle with in a lot of ways. But what were your touchstones with transgressive art, and where do you land on it today?
I've been thinking a lot about being the cool girl, like trying to be the Gen X cool girl back then, and like pretending to be cool with a lot of things that I'm actually not cool with,
Mm-hmm.
like behaviors and experiences that were a little bit hard that I felt like I had to tough it out through. Um, and sometimes that would show up just in the work that I was reading or listening to, but I think I can't think of the first one, but I can think of some very specific ones that became important. I found a back issue of Forced Exposure that had the final Big Black tour diary, and I didn't know who they like. I was a huge Sonic Youth fan as a teenager because that was the only band of that kind of New York guitars, post no wave milieu that was accessible to a teenager
Sure.
in even in New York City. Like, and even in New York City, people made fun of me for listening to that stuff. Really, like you were still like an underground, like if you were into that stuff, you were still like this unacceptable weirdo, you know. I read this Big Black tour diary and I was like, whoa,
Yeah, I remember that.
whoa, right? And like, and then I hadn't read it in many years, and somebody found it for me on the internet Wayback Machine, and I didn't realize, in my memory, I didn't remember that the first entry is the East German brothel part. Wild. But then it might have even been in the same issue. I found Lisa Carver's tour diary, Lisa Suckdog. And I was sort of like peripherally aware of her because I had interned at this downtown avant-garde music magazine called Ear, where they were very the editor of that magazine once took me aside and said, "Leela, the music you like, it has a beat." This lady's son was constantly like harassing me and trying to get me to go on a date with him, like standing over the desk and looking down my shirt.
Oh,
The whole experience was like, oof,
that's
gross.
horrible. Wow.
And like everything about that, like the way they treated me was disgusting. But I got to go to a lot of shows and I got a lot of cutout albums,
Sure.
like really, like I would go to CMJ, like on a press pass. It was really fun for that reason. And one of the freelancers there kept talking about Lisa Suckdog. And I was like, who's this Lisa Suckdog person? I thought, is this a hardcore band or something? Because there was also the hardcore scene that was happening at the same time in New York, and I was avoiding it like the plague.
Yes.
So at first I was like, that sounds like a hardcore band, not for me. And then I read her tour diary, and I can still remember lines from it. Um, Somewhere I have a copy of the Suckdog book that she published a few years ago. But she became a really important influence to me just as a writer. Such a great writer. And she's still at it. I mean, every time she puts out a new book, I make sure I buy it. And I've been attending her Zoom philosophy hour that she's been holding for the past couple of years.
Wow.
She's amazing. The, she's never stopped. So there was that, and then, of course, there was Sonic Youth, who felt like, um that music felt like the city at the time. Like, I remember listening to Expressway to Your Skull and just feeling like, "Oh, I'm in a subway tunnel." Like, this is what it feels like a melancholy winter day on the subway. I wasn't living in the, like, dark, dangerous, forced exposure New York. But also, like, when I think about that, I think about this particular writing style that I don't know if forced exposure pioneered that, but then in the 90s, it just became this de rigueur thing. My friend John Lewis, who's also a great cartoonist, we were talking about this once, like many, many years ago. And he just went, we were talking about that style of record review where it's like deliberately really harsh writing, like
Yes.
this listening to this record is like going to sleep next to a poodle and waking up next to a rabid pit bull. I don't know. I can't do it because I'm not
Well, you forgot
that kind
it.
of
It
writer.
needed to be like puking on you or eating you or
Or in a
yeah,
blender,
exactly. There you go. That yeah, yeah.
in a blender with a speaker, and
And a
yeah,
straw.
right. Maybe some other accoutrement.
Yeah.
John just went, this record is not going to hurt me.
Yes. Yeah.
But getting us away from that, another really major touchstone was the Research Angry Women book,
Yes.
which I have since gifted to a lot of younger women. Um, in a move that may be a bit of a Gen X dick move, I don't know. Like, hey, you didn't ask me for this big book of interviews with like Susie Bright and Diamanda Galas, but
Yeah.
and Diamanda Galas was a huge thing. Lydia Lunch was completely ubiquitous in the subculture, such that I didn't even really hear her music until later, but she was so around all the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think for me, it had a lot to do with the women who were making work at the time. And I'm by no means I don't have an encyclopedic knowledge of all of them, but just knowing that there was a piece of the subculture in which a woman's anger was sacred. And that is where I think I aimed myself, even though I will say later in my years of being a commercial illustrator, I I shut that part of myself down pretty hard. And being a belly dancer was also like not that. But when I came back to it, it was really like, yeah, that's my place.
I knew about the belly dancing, but like, was it traditional? Were you so
Very.
okay?
I specialized in Egyptian style dance. I studied other things too, and then I got very into Arabic music. The radio show that I used to host was like 75% Middle Eastern music. And then when I came back to noisy underground music, I just kind of like it was like that whole part of my life just was like a building that I entered, explored, and then exited.
Yeah.
Much respect. I just it was nice to come home. Let's put it that
Maybe you should start belly dancing to Forbidden Zone, your film pick, because this
way.
film has dance sequence, animation sequence, musical sequences, comedy. It's a perfect midnight movie, and it's been really interesting. Obviously the people who wanted us to talk about it they just love it. Like my co-host on the Patreon, Chalky the Funk Wizard, just thinks it's one of the greatest pieces of art ever made. But then it's so funny, you go online and people are really upset by a lot of the imagery in this film. But I'm really curious, before we get into all of this, where did you first see this film?
Okay, so I first saw this film at a friend's house in high school. My friend Suzette, who somehow in high school had her own apartment down the hall from her mom's. She had this little tiny studio
Perfect.
apartment
Wow.
in Hell's Kitchen, and it was painted completely purple. She was this really fabulous goth chick, and we we um we would listen to the Cocteau Twins a lot and talk about boys. And Cocteau Twins more her thing, but it fit in that environment.
Yeah.
Somehow we ended up watching that, and of course it was probably midnight, and we were probably pretty high, and then let's see, when the next time I saw that, I moved into this communal house in Cambridge a few years later when I was in college in Central Square, Cambridge, Mass. And I just one night, like the first week I lived there, I was alone in the living room and I found a VHS tape of The Forbidden Zone. And so I just put it in and I was watching it. And then a few days later, one of the people who lived there was like, "Oh, you know, I saw you watching that." And I turned to so and so, the other roommate, and I was like, "Look, she's watching the movie." So it turned out that that was like secretly the house movie.
Oh, wow. Yes. Mine was Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. In the
Oh,
I lived
amazing.
in the Hell Cow House. Same thing. It's almost the same story where they were like, they were, they wanted to turn me on. It was amazing.
I love that.
Yes.
You know what? I still have not seen Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. I need to remedy that, like, maybe tonight. Well, I mean, it became this movie that I watched over and over again. At the time, it wasn't so easy. There's no YouTube, there's no internet. It's 1994 or whatever. Like, you've gotta, like, luck into seeing a lot of stuff or finding things. And God, I'm trying to even remember. I think it was my friend who I first saw it with who remembered a lot of the lines from it. So we would just kind of like spout those lines. Then I remember when the internet happened in the late 90s, buying a copy, like a VHS copy of it and watching it all the time in my house. And so that was like, then it became like, okay, I have access to this. It's mine now. Fast forward a few years when I was working on Unterzakhn. No, actually, before that, I did this book called Subway Series that was like, I consider that my juvenilia. It was the
Okay.
first long work that I did. And I put a line from The Forbidden Zone in that, where it was this really loosely autobiographical version of me um, running out of a classroom in high school and saying, "I got to change a Tampax. I'll see you later," which is Viva's line, like
Right.
when she gets free from her shackles in the dungeon at the
Yeah.
end of the movie.
Viva from the Andy Warhol scene is in this film. I
Yes,
mean, it's amazing, the casting in this. We'll get into that. But yeah,
you
so,
will. Yeah. Well, and so then in Unterzakhn, I put a line from the Witch's Egg song
mhm.
in one of the scenes, and I realized, okay, this is now my rule. My rule is when I make a long form comic, there has to be a line from The Forbidden Zone in it somewhere.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, I guess we've got some work to do, people.
Yeah, find the Easter eggs, everybody. I'm amazed that so many people have asked you to cover this movie.
Yeah, it's funny. What happened was this film, before MTV happened, there was a show on cable called Night Flight,
Yeah,
which is still, you can get it streaming. And this film is streaming on Night Flight, and it's on Tubi. You can watch it for free, but it's a different version than the version that was released. There's some things added and some things changed. So Night Flight was showing like, the Residents and Devo videos, and then also like Alfred Jarry, like experimental films like Ubu Roy. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but like full on like like student short films, right? That had like German expressionist, type of set design. And Forbidden Zone was on all the time. So as a teenager, when you can't find Pink Flamingos on VHS yet, but you've heard about it, and those research books you talked about,
yeah,
Incredibly Strange books, the Pranks books, all that stuff was, you could read about it before you saw it. And Forbidden Zone was the same thing, but I could see it. It was like coming through on cable. And it was one of the few underground films, like Night Flight wasn't showing, Desperate Living. So Forbidden Zone for me was like one of the first long form experimental films that I'd ever seen. We taped it as well, and just watched it all the time. I didn't know anything about it being part of Oingo Boingo and the Mystic Knights of Oingo Boingo. I didn't know anything about Richard Elfman or the story or anything about it. All I knew was Hervé Villechaize, who Tattoo is in it, right? And that was my touch. I was like, I know him. I don't know who Viva is. I didn't know who Susan Tyrrell was yet. I hadn't seen Fat City. So it was just like, oh, this is that kind of stuff I've read about, but I I haven't seen it yet. So this is a midnight movie, right? So at 13 or 14, before Rocky Horror, things like that had entered my space or whatever, or seen Eraserhead, this was the film that I had access to. So I think a lot of people from our generation experienced it at a very young age, didn't know what to do with it, but it was also like, it's here and it's so unusual, and I'm trying to put it all together because it's a lot. And
It is
so
a
I
lot.
think that's what it is. I think there's I think it's people who just saw it at a certain age and it just stuck.
The other dimension of the Forbidden Zone, maybe the seventh dimension, um, was that there's all this Yiddish in it and all this Yinglish. And I grew up in a family of Yiddish speakers. I'm very committed to the preservation of Yinglish, which is very frowned upon by a lot of contemporary Yiddish revivalists. And to them, I say, "Geh because seriously, man, like English is really, it's really important, and it's the language in which my grandparents and I communicated. So there's
Right.
all of like Alta Cocker's like, I was just reading, okay, so I have in front of me this issue of the magazine Coil House that Meredith Yayanos used to be part of. So years ago, she sent me this copy. This is an amazing issue. It's got an article about El Lissitzky. It's got an interview with Blixa Bargeld. It's got a very long article about the Forbidden Zone. And I just was reading it before I talked to you to refresh my memory. I was reminded reading this interview that it's the Elfman's grandfather who plays the money changer character, which is kind of obvious. And he looks like one of my uncles, great uncles. He sounds like his Yiddish is kind of the same dialect. So there's that layer of humor in it too, which for me immediately made me feel at home. Like, okay, so this is like clearly a punk movie. I can tell it's in black and white. And so I saw it when I was 17 for the first time. And I had already gotten very into any kind of underground film I could get my hands on or get in front of. I remember my mother did me this great mitzvah when I was 14 or 15. A friend was over and she said, "Hey, you guys, there's a movie you guys should see playing at this place called the Film Forum. Here's $20. Go see it." And it was Repulsion. So, screw Paul, like we could get rid of him now and have see films by people who didn't assault people. But, at the time, before we knew that, at 14, we were like, whoa, this is mind blowing. And then I remember the next year, well, immediately I fell in love with Film Forum. Like that place is like a temple,
Mm-hmm.
And um, I remember going to see Pull My Daisy the next year and like making all my friends come see it and rolling their eyes at me. Jan Svankmeyer's Alice was another one
Oh,
that
that
they
was a
screened.
big, I saw it on the screen too. Yep.
Oh God, it's so good.
Yeah.
I made the mistake of showing that movie to my sophomores a couple of years ago, and I was looking around the room at them, and I was like, "Oh no, these are people who are like 25 years younger than me or more, and grew up watching really fast-paced
Oh yeah, they're
stuff."
like, that head's rolling down the hill again. Like it's just like a lot of repetition. But yeah, you're like, but do you see how much work this is? Like this took forever. Come on, people.
The meat is talking.
Yes, exactly. No, no, I saw Faust. I saw all those in the theater.
Loved it. So I was kind of like primed for Forbidden Zone already. So I sort of understood where it fit a little bit. And I think I might have been sort of beginning to discover underground comics at that point too, because that was around the same time that I discovered rock comics, which dropped into my life like a bomb and detonated. It was like a ticket to the future. Like,
Yeah,
here's what you're going to do for the rest of your life.
amazing. To have something that was cost less than a record and was like one of the first art objects I could own as a kid. Incredible.
That is amazing. So I missed that, and I got the reissues or the
Those were still great.
they were amazing. And then, there was all of this stuff kind of happening at the same time in New York at that time. There was this amazing store called Soho Zat. It was paradise. It was vintage postcard, well, not just vintage, like family photos of people who are dead now, like in boxes you could just go through.
Yes, totally know
Postcard,
that kind of stuff. Yes, yes.
so, piles of vintage clothes, some random army surplus, old records, and a spin of Last Gasp comics and Fantagraphics and Raw. So I would go in there after work and I would like buy a copy of Zippy the Pinhead or, I mean, that was where I first read Love and Rockets and, another touchstone. But to come back to the Forbidden Zone, when I saw it, I understood the sort of aesthetic to some extent. I didn't understand the connection to German expressionist film, which is really interesting. but I understood that it was an art project, and weirdly, some of the music was familiar. Like my American grandfather had a copy of that Bim Bam Boom album. He had a 78 of it. I have it
Oh,
now.
that's amazing. That's a great sequence.
It's so incredible where you see the mouth moving and
Yeah, and I guess so what happens is so Richard Elfman, the brother of Danny Elfman, made this film, and it was a project for the troupe that Richard Elfman started called the Mystic Knights of Oingo Boingo, correct?
yes.
And it was like a stage troupe in LA. We had Steve Bartek come on the a Music War podcast. Um, and it was so funny. His view of this stuff, he was like, "Oh yeah, like that was kind of embarrassing. Like we had to carry around a lot of equipment and dress up a lot. It was a big ordeal, and like moving into rock as Oingo Boingo, which is kind of what happened during this film. Is like Richard was like, I want to document this stage troupe while we can, because Danny took over and basically, moved it into more of a rock thing with Oingo Boingo, which was not my band. Like Oingo Boingo was not my thing. Was it? Did you ever get into Oingo Boingo?
Not really, which was another aspect of me like, oh no, do I need to go listen to Oingo Boingo now to have this
Yes,
conversation? Like know everything about them. I mean, they're interesting when I hear them.
they were their own thing. Like you hear it
Yeah.
and you're like, it's Oingo Boingo. And they were, obviously beloved in LA. But what was interesting about it was, Richard had spent some time with the Cockettes, performing in San Francisco.
Oh, well, I mean, amazing. The Cockettes were amazing.
What was interesting about it was it took like 3 years for him to make this film. He made it with Matthew Bright, who plays, is it Squeeze It? Is that his name?
He plays both Squeeze It and Renee. Under the name Toshiro Baloney.
Okay, this film gets a lot of flack from people online today. Like, this would not pass sensitivity training. The interesting thing is, Matthew Bright, this is the only film he acted in, but he went on to direct and write other films that were just as weird. I don't know if you ever saw Freeway.
No.
That has Reese Witherspoon and Keith Sutherland. Highly recommended as a cult film. Very upsetting and weird. And then he also made the film Tiptoes, which features Gary Oldman as a little person. And so people have constantly been like, I have a problem with this guy, right? In terms of like, imagery, playing around with race and sex. And I mean, there's a lot of people who go online and they're like, this film is homophobic. This film is racist. This film, they even say it about like having, his Jewish grandfather in it. People are like, he's making fun of Yiddish and stuff. And you're like, that's his grandfather. That's how he talks. It's not a put on.
I mean, also, it isn't only the grandfather. There's all this other stuff. Like there's the scene where okay, so there's the other reason I was so primed to see the Forbidden Zone and understand it was because I was very into old black and white cartoons as a teenager.
Max Fleischer kind of stuff? Is it?
Yeah. I mean, all that stuff. I mean, I didn't understand that I was basically getting the education of an underground cartoonist at that point. Like, really liked 20s and 30s jazz and the cartoons that went along with it. And I didn't really know Cab Calloway specifically, but I understood that I knew that music kind of already. So, and that the aesthetics of it. And then that meshed with the Yiddish stuff. Like there's that great scene where the father, Pa Hercules, ends up down in the sixth dimension and he's doing this performance for the queen that's extremely irritating to her, and she ends up shooting him with a ray gun, hand-drawn laser. But he goes from having this weird kind of like not great fake Swedish accent to singing a really odd version of Little Yiddles, which I also made reference to. Okay, the first time I was ever called a self-hating Jew was because I drew a comic about, it was called The Irreducibles, and it was about things that are irreducible in yourself as an Ashkenazi Jew, like even if you are very assimilated and very American. And one of the things I did was quote that song, which isn't the way that Little Yiddles actually goes. It's the Forbidden Zone's version of it. I was criticized online and called a self-hating Jew, probably also because I like jarred gefilte fish. Anyway, point of contention among us in the community. But I mean, no, they're not making fun of Yiddish people. They're using their own culture, and I mean, the Forbidden Zone is kind of an incredible creation because it's all of these layers of vaudeville and new wave and Yinglish and Yiddish vaudeville, basically. And then also, it's kind of like a snapshot of the underground culture at the time where there's this very deliberate button pushing transgression that, yeah, I will say some of it makes me really uncomfortable now. Like I wouldn't show it in class.
Right.
I wouldn't know how to contextualize the blackface at the beginning. Like I think it's good that they took that out in the new cut of it. Like, yeah, get rid of that. I like the way that we have evolved from that. I also think that the reason why a lot of people were doing that and able to do that in the 80s and 90s had to do with who was doing it. Like, if you had the privilege to be in a position to do that kind of humor and you weren't the unintentional target of it, you could do it without feeling, I mean, I think the conversation has moved on, right? So we are more sensitive. And
Absolutely.
I'm glad of that. I don't need clown makeup ever, but I like I don't like clowns. What can I say? But that was like I watched the colorized version as my homework.
Yeah, it's kind of the only version. It's easier to find. I watched them both side by side.
Oh my God, that is commitment.
Yes, because I was like, what else did they cut out? And they actually added a scene, like about 40 to 50 seconds of a scene in the colorized version. The colorized version's longer. But I was like, I'm going to watch this because it's a beautiful black and white film.
It's so beautiful. I love it. I love the black and white better aesthetically.
Absolutely. The animation in this film is so high caliber for what they were doing at the time. I can't believe it. So there'll be an amazing sound stage that they've built with like dice elements on the floor, and then it turns into the animation, it rolls out, and it's just
beautiful.
It's incredible, and it all matches up. Like, it's seamless. It was really weird. I didn't know much about the animator who did the film, but I did find out that Jim Shaw, do you know his work?
It rings a bell. I think I do.
He was a peer of Mike Kelly's
Yeah, yes,
and stuff like
yes.
that. Incredible painter, visual artist. He worked on this as well. And it started, you're like, of course, it was probably the weirdest, coolest people throwing their own time and money into this. By the time the film came out, Richard Elfman sold his house, was broke, had to sell the rights to this, and
Oh, wow, I didn't know any of
only
that.
got it back a little while
Oh,
ago. Bought it back. So now he has the rights to the thing he made. But this is a film that, you know, you watch Desperate Living by John Waters, and yes, they've made, you know, their own cities, you know, and towns, and like, you know, Desperate Living. Or you watch the elements of The Residents trying to do Whatever Happened to Vile Miss Fats, which they'd never completed. I'm always in awe of anyone who's like, we are going to build a world. The walls, the floor, the ceiling, the outdoors, the cars, like it's ambitious because it has such a throwback to, like, you know, 30s and 40s musicals as well.
There's another element of this that I recognize, and I'm sure you do too, which is the labor of love element of it, where you just like you and a bunch of other people sweat and labor so hard to make a work of art that only a few people are going to see, and you give everything to it, and you probably aren't going to make any money. You're probably going to lose money on it. Like this is like a classic comics person thing, and also like the theater, you know, zine person, indie rock kind of thing. Like you work your ass off to make this incredible vision come to life, whether or not other people believe in it, you know?
It's so hard to make stuff and to finish it and to have something where people just have to show up. You have to be in this scene. We have to paint this set. We have to get everyone involved. I'm always in awe of films that get finished because I'm like, people showed up. Even films like that are on Mystery Science Theater that are
Oh, yeah.
bad. Like Frank Conniff from Mystery Science Theater came on the show to talk about like a Jacques Demy film, like a really beautiful film. But we were talking about the films that they had to watch. And he's like, I kind of love them because, yeah, people had to be there. Like the supporting character had to show up in this bad film and be there and learn the lines and then like see you tomorrow or see you in 2 months or whatever they could do. So a film like this that was made over such a long period of time, kind of like Eraserhead was, where it's just like, we've built this world, people are going to have to show up and help us do this. It's just blows my mind.
Yeah, same. And it's that for me, it's also like that commitment. Like, I'm going to show up. It's funny you mentioned Mystery Science Theater because I keep making reference to that in the long form comics class I'm teaching. Mainly, there's this terrible movie called The Girl in the Golden Go-Go Boots. It's like unwatchable.
I believe I've seen it. I believe I did. I believe I had that at the video store.
But there's this moment where some of the Mystery Science Theater banter that's happening is exactly something I'm trying to teach in my class. And it's just one of them saying, "Oh, look, it's Captain Exposition and Detective Plot Point." I want to talk about song poem music for a second too, because that's another area where people come in and they're so committed to this weird thing. And how familiar are you with the genre?
Is this where people could send in
Yes,
lyrics
yes.
and then they would record it for
There
you?
would be like weirdo session musicians who were like, "Who the fuck are these people?" Yeah, and I don't know if you ever crossed paths with a guy named Phil Milstein, but he was sort of like the underground secret weapon. He lived in Massachusetts. He was a really nice guy. He ran and maybe still runs the American Song Poem Music Archive.
Okay.
We ended up meeting him through Peter Bagg years ago. It's just like a
Of course.
thing, of course, but the reason I'm bringing it up is just to talk about the act of committing really hard to something, even if it isn't. See, like, this is where you get into the slippery territory of calling things good or bad, right?
Yeah.
And I think the Forbidden Zone it is a work of art. There's this guy, Gabe Soria, writer and comics person and all around awesome person, who also, like, he calls the Forbidden Zone the best movie ever made, which I do too. But everybody who was in that movie committed really hard. Like, I was reading that Hervé Villechaize, like, he gave some of his own money to making that movie. He showed up every day to paint the sets. Like, he really believed in this vision. And then, there's just like the collaborative aspect of it is really interesting. Susan Tyrrell wrote the Witch's Egg song.
I know.
Which that's an amazing song.
Yes. You know her from Cry Baby. You know her from Fat City. She's amazing.
Actually, I haven't seen Fat City. I need to see that.
Oh, it's so good. It might be, well, I love a lot of John Huston films, but it's right up there. Unforgettable film. And she's amazing in it. And it's funny because there's a family thing too, because Hervé was roommates with Matthew, who's in the film as, what was it, Toshiro what is his name?
Toshiro Bologna, which I assume that's a play on Toshiro Mifune.
Yeah, that's exactly. And then Susan used to date Hervé. And so, like, they're all like part of this scene in LA, right? And of course, people want to do cool shit. They're like, yeah, I'm in, these films I don't care about. I'm on, Fantasy Island. Like, I want to be in cool shit. Let's do it, And I love that too.
Play the king of the sixth dimension, who's married to, like, who wouldn't want to be married to Susan Tyrrell,
Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. She's fearless in this.
There's a moment in the Witch's Egg number that I also think about all the time because it is a performer's moment. It's a moment where you can tell that her dress has ridden up and she's not happy about it, and she pushes it down on the beat.
Yes, amazing.
It's a Lorax dress, and I'm totally speculating here, and she's no longer around to ask this completely useless question, but I see it every time I watch the movie, and I'm like, yeah, I've been there.
Yeah, I love when you're like, I know. I'm taking this as an absolute truth that this was a choice because she was frustrated with the outfit. This was not, she didn't do it the second time. They caught it and they put this in.
Totally.
So, Forbidden Zone, how would you describe the plot of this movie?
Okay, so like a lot of musicals, The plot is kind of, I wouldn't even say secondary, it's tertiary to the rest of the movie, or maybe it's in another building entirely, but it does kind of have a plot. I think the plot is Frenchie disappears into the Forbidden Zone. Other people go to find her. And then see, as I'm trying to describe it, it's unraveling in my head. Like, well, let's think about the beginning. Frenchie is in school.
Yes.
And at the end, she's married to the king of the sixth dimension and she's the new queen. So is it a love story?
Right. And in between, people travel through intestinal tracts and bowels and get crapped out into the other dimension.
And there's an incredible interlude with Danny Elfman as the devil doing Cab Calloway.
It's nuts, like a musical from the 30s or 40s, where it's like, it doesn't really matter. We're going to get to the end. And at the end, we're going to have a big finale where everyone's going to come down the stairs and sing. Right.
That finale is amazing. And I wonder if they were thinking explicitly about the finale of Gold Diggers of 1933, which is an amazing Busby Berkeley movie that, unlike a lot of dance movies, has a plot you can follow. It has a kind of really enjoyable sort of, hey kids, let's put on a show plot. I am a sucker, by the way, for a hey kids, let's put on a show story. I love that kind of thing. Okay, if you want to talk about totally inappropriate media. All right, when I was in first and second grade, it was 1978 and 1979. I went to PS 75 in New York City, public school 75, on 96th and West End Avenue. And at recess, if it was cold or rainy, they would pull us all into the auditorium and they would show us, sometimes they'd show us old cartoons and they would be great, like also 1930s and 40s black and white cartoons. But often they would show us episodes of The Little Rascals. And this is like,
yes,
New York City in the late 70s, predominantly black and brown school, and they're making the kids watch The Little Rascals, which is like unadulterated racist imagery.
Can't believe it was on TV when I was a kid. And it was just like, here it is.
Yeah, here's buckwheat.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, I think even as small children, I remember thinking like, this is weird. Why are all the black people servants and why are what is happening? Like, I don't understand this, but
absolutely.
I have to wonder, what did the teachers think about it? Yeah, like what? But so that was kind of another stream that was feeding into already kind of clocking what the Forbidden Zone was referring to when I first saw it. And also, I think the internal logic of that story, to come back to the idea of whether there is a plot or not, the internal logic of that story is not like a 3-act structure, although it sort of loosely has one. It's sort of like sketches out acts, and then inside of the structure of those acts is just chaos. But the internal logic of that is more like one of those old cartoons where it's sort of like somebody falls into a realm that's not theirs and has all these weird experiences that don't make any sense, and they're singing and dancing, and like all of a sudden there's the La Brea Tar Pit number.
I want to talk about the musical numbers.
Please.
When that comes in, after watching this very ambitious film, it comes in and kind of, it's such a palate cleanser from what you've seen before. It's, people in, businessmen drag, basically doing a total synchronized, like going to work factory type of thing. And it's done so incredibly tightly, and the way that they have like the fake cars and the fake buildings and the factory is built up to this point. Whenever it's a musical number, it's a limited number of people on the screen. It may be like 5 or 6. So it's kind of the first time in the film, besides the elementary school setting, that you're like, oh my gosh, okay, they're all singing. Like there's, 30 to 40 people on this thing. It just expands it.
Yeah. And they're doing this amazing choreography, and they're great dancers, which you see in the school scene also. That school scene is incredible. When I was rewatching it, I turned to my husband and I was like, this is what it felt like this chaos at the beginning where they're all screaming and yelling and punching each other and throwing stuff. This is like what the lunchroom felt like to me as a little kid.
Yeah. Yeah, and shooting up, and then the teacher shoots a machine gun over their head to get them to be quiet. It's totally what you...
Well, metaphorically speaking.
No, I know, totally.
And then sends you to Mr. Yodelbean's office.
Yeah. Let's talk about some of the musical numbers.
Please.
In this.
This was my introduction to Josephine Baker's music, and to Josephine Baker et al. who I got very obsessed with later. She was a badass, an incredible human being. But I love that lip sync of La Petite Tonkinoise. And which is also just a wonderful song.
Yeah, and I saw it at an age where I was like, I just assumed that they were like trying to mimic things that were old. I didn't know that this was the actual recordings
Oh,
so I just was like, oh, this is old timey, because by the time Danny Elfman shows up and does the Minnie the Moocher kind of scene at the end, you're like, oh, that's Danny Elfman. I knew who he was because Oingo Boingo had already been on MTV at that point. So I just assumed that they'd recorded all this stuff, but it's like between, like you said, Bim Bam Boom, is that what it's called?
Bim Bam Boom, which is by a singer named Miguelito Valdez. And I think my American grandfather, bought that 78 when he was in the Army.
That song is so amazing in this film too. I guess
Yeah.
at one point they pull in this kid in like a Mickey Mouse hat, and they filmed him, and he was supposed to lip sync this, kind of fast lyrical content, and he just sat there or stood there. And so Richard Elfman just put it in post, like filmed his mouth singing over this kid's mouth. It's one of my favorite moments in the film.
It's so hallucinatory. What I was just reading in the Coil House article is that the kid was so shy that he couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So Matthew Bright's mouth lip syncing.
Well, yeah, and he's in a couple other scenes. I mean,
Oh yeah, he's the pet. He's the princess's pet when she comes in and says, "My pet needs to mate."
yeah, he's being dragged around by basically naked women throughout this film.
Naked
So,
women in gigantic granny panties who are somehow
yes,
making it work because they're so like
the
light.
granny panties are.
Oh my God, those gigantic underwear.
Oh, it's so funny. Yeah.
There's also the thing, and I know this is not, we'll get back to the music, but the thing where it's all adults playing children in the movie.
Yes.
Also, there's a great deleted scene. I'll have to send it to you, where again, this goes to the Yiddish part, where Grandpa and I'm blanking on the old man who's playing the little kid in the propeller beanie, whatever. But there's a whole scene where it's just a musical number to this amazing Yiddish recording by a singer named Aaron Lebedev, who was an amazing Yiddish, like popular singer.
Okay.
I'll send that to you. But I have a feeling, and I would love to know if this is true, but I wonder if the wrestler Grandpa is based on a wrestler named Blimp Levy, who was this Jewish wrestler in the early decades of the 20th century, maybe I want to say 40s, 50s, or middle of the century. He was famous for being very large. He was extremely tall and he weighed like 400, 500 pounds or something. The great Yiddishist Eddie Portnoy wrote a lot about Blimp Levy, and I actually illustrated a comic that Eddie wrote about the blimp. So I just kind of like putting these things together later.
Did your interest in wrestling, did it predate when you were working with the Mountain Goats on their wrestling concept album?
No. So that purely came from that. Like John just emailed me one day and was like, "Hey, I was thinking about I'm doing this wrestling themed album, and of course it's all, the wrestling is metaphors for other things, and I was just thinking you'd be the perfect artist for it." And I was like, "Okay, sure." Really thinking like, "Oh, he could have called Jaime Hernandez."
Yeah.
Who really knows how to draw wrestlers.
Right, it's true.
But I had a 10-year stint as a martial arts student, and so I had like a sensory relationship, like a sensory memory of grappling and being really like in sweaty grappling kind of spaces with people, like really close, like throwing each other around and stuff. And so drawing those wrestlers was really fun.
Yeah, Victory Parade, it's that the wrestling stuff is just incredible.
Oh, thank you. It was really fun to draw, and this is going to sound weird, but it was fun to make it a trauma metaphor also. I mean, it made sense that this wrestler would be kind of doing it because she doesn't know how else to live. But no, that completely started with that Mountain Goats album. I just spent a lot of time like talking to John about wrestlers and like specifically West Coast territory wrestlers in the 1980s and doing all this research that was really fun.
Well, it's funny because in the film, did you know much about the Kipper Kids who are in this, who play the boxers in it? Are you familiar with them?
Well, okay, so one of the other streams that I was sort of aware of coming into the movie was because I was really another place I interned in high school was this performance art space, and so I was kind of aware of like some of the people who were doing performance art at the time. So I'd
Right.
heard of them, but I didn't, they were sort of like mentioned occasionally, but I had never seen them.
Yeah, me
And
either. I'd read about them in, like old Slash magazines that people had given me, because they were very predominant in like the punk scene as performers. And so it was like, oh my gosh, I think that's the Kipper Kids. And then realizing it was like, again, it was another like lightning bolt. Like I'm seeing performance art finally. I'm putting these things together. I've read about or seen a static photo. The Kipper Kids were these two performers, and they had a performance called Boxing Ceremony in the early 70s where one would be the referee and the other one would punch themselves till they bled.
oh, like the Knockout Artist, like that Harry Crews book.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. So in this film, I don't even know what they represent, but it's just like when they come on and they go, yeah, 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 yeah. They're just like just making these weird.
They're doing that guttural thing where they're singing like backwards in their
Yeah.
throat.
Yeah, it's like that was really exciting to me as a kid who was just starting to be able to, thanks to like, shows like Night Flight and other things, things were just starting to become actually moving in real time instead of reading about it for the first time.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that movie brings together, it's such an incredible ensemble cast. Also, in the manner I want to say of a like one of those old 30s musicals, but I guess also in some ways it's kind of like a demented underground version of the kind of variety shows that used to be a staple of TV. I don't know if that's too far of a stretch, but
No, I mean, you could tell they were at the age where by the time they could make this, there wasn't that many choices. Like if you're watching if you were a kid and you were stuck at home and you were 10, like after a while you're like, I just need something to watch, and this stuff was on all the
I
time.
cannot imagine seeing that as a 10-year-old. That would definitely warp my brain.
But yeah, you mentioned Witch's Egg, which is so cool that Susan Tyrrell worked and co-wrote this song for her solo piece. Very new wave song, kind of different than a lot of the music in this film.
Yeah, yeah, and it really feels it has her stamp on it, you know. It's such a good anthem. And it also has that beautiful segue into that animation where her head detaches and is floating in space.
Oh, it's so that again, you're just like, how did you? They do that stuff so seamlessly.
People in the industry who were doing this again as a labor of love, right? Like I don't know anything about the animation aspect of it, like who worked on it. Uh, I'm really glad that you read about that. Again, I tried to know everything, but my life has been very, very swamped crazy lately.
Yeah, no, I hear you. We can barely keep our head together or on our heads.
Oh, I'm so glad I'm here. Your show has become such a lifesaver for me, and I've turned so many other people onto it. Like you got to hear this. It's like the best
Oh,
thing.
I'm so touched. That's amazing. I wanted to talk about a couple things that I really love in the film. I love the alphabet song, which Jenny Elfman wrote. It's such a weird,
It's so
the stuttering, the weird backwards language of it, and the fact that people nail it because obviously they record this track. This is an original song, and it's got a very complicated sense of rhythm and language in it that just doesn't make any sense. And then people have to lip sync it, and again, they're killing it.
totally.
And even when it gets to squeeze its turn, and they're like flailing around, and
He
everyone's
is
laughing at
gay,
him.
gay, gay, gay.
Yeah, it's like it's I don't know. I wish he had acted more
Yeah.
because I think he's amazing in this film. You're just like your heart goes
Oh,
out to this
he's
poor
so
kid.
sympathetic and the poor chicken boy scene, you know, like that amazing scene where he's at his typewriter and having this telepathic conversation with a chicken. And then Susan Tyrrell as his mom comes in, and that is an act of performance art. Like the moment where her sailor boyfriend says that he's only got a couple of hours and her whole demeanor completely shifts in a second and she slumps down and her face changes. I was like, that's performance art. That's not just theatrical.
Absolutely.
But to go back to the alphabet song, it's of a piece for me with the dance choreography in all of the places where there's dancing. It makes me think like I really wish that I could be a fly on the wall at the rehearsals. I want to know how much they rehearsed all of that dancing and all of those lip syncs because it's really, really tight.
It is.
And it's not like they had an endless budget for editing and foleying and all that stuff.
And also, how do you get the material to everyone at this point? It would have to be cassette, maybe? Or like it wasn't.
You have to show up. You have to show up.
Right.
Like listen, here's your part, or be in a dance studio and be like, okay, so here's your part. You're going to walk forward and then you're going to do this big kick and a split and then you're going to turn and then the next line's going to come.
Yeah.
And then they have to rehearse that again and again and again to get it right.
It's not a sloppy film at all. I want people to understand a lot of underground films have a haphazard nature to them. And even though the energy is very haphazard, this film is so tightly constructed.
I mean, I guess maybe it's easier to do something like that in LA where there's already people who are in the business at some level, and maybe they're your friends and they come in and they are part of your weird underground project, but it's also really well written. Like the dialogue is really well written. And I want to highlight what you just said. It's not a sloppy movie. It's, even though I struggle to describe the plot, I don't think the plot is what matters. I think what matters is just the strange internal logic of it that holds together really well. And the dialogue is incredible.
Yeah. But I mean, how would you describe female trouble to someone? You know what I mean? It's like there's certain films that are just, you're just like, it's got divine in it. Come on, just go see it. Just
go along for the ride.
Exactly. I guess one of the few fights they had about this script was that Matthew, who plays Squeeze It, wanted to keep in an 8-minute scene where he gets beat up for 8 minutes, and then they're using him to smear his blood on all the walls. And I guess he and Richard Elfman were like, he's like, we just can't do it. It's just it's too long. And Matthew basically, in this interview I read, said, I really learned a lot from being like, okay, like the idea is funny and it'll look great and it'll fit this world, but yeah, that's just not going to work, And he was like he was like, no, this has to be in it. That's my big scene.
Oh my God, I did not know that. But this is where being a cartoonist is really useful, because if you're just making a comic, you can do it.
That's true.
You're not working with like expensive rental spaces or film or equipment or people.
There's not many films. Well, there's no film like it. You know what I mean? And
nothing.
so I go in my head, I'm like, okay, there are midnight movies that have rock elements, or musical elements, Phantom of the Paradise, Rocky Horror. And it's really funny, when I did the live event with Paul Williams about Phantom of the Paradise, he was like, yeah, there's certain scenes that if we made this today, the audience would kill us. He's like, we couldn't be, like, oh, this is how we're portraying somebody who may or may not be queer. Like, he's like, yeah, that could not happen. This is from, again, an era that we're talking about transgressive art, where people just were like, these are the things I love. These are the things that I grew up with. I want to mess with it. I'm making it with my friends. I don't know if there's an audience out there. Obviously, they weren't going to make money on this at all. So to do something that's so long form and then find an audience, whether it was like through the midnight movie circuit or on Night Flight and cable or on a VHS tape that just showed up in somebody's house.
Yeah, it finds its people.
I just think it was a brilliant choice for you to pick, because it is you.
Yeah, for better and for worse, it's me. As much as those other things, like I'm very serious and my work is very serious, but I'm also like, there's always a vaudeville show happening up here. I got to be the vaudeville belly dancer do you know the book No Applause, Just Throw Money by Travis?
No.
Oh, it's really great. It's a history of vaudeville, and he's a terrific writer. So I read that book, and I guess I met him. I went to a reading or something, and then he put out a call like a year later, looking for somebody to do the Salome act in a tie-in show for that book. And I was like, hey, I'll do it.
Oh,
So
wow.
it was like similar to the Forbidden Zone. It was like total labor of love where everybody's like spending all this time doing their bit, all these different people doing their bits, some of which were like a few people doing a vaudeville act that was like really tightly rehearsed, and I mean, as was mine. Like I had a guy behind me and I had a cast of his head, and I was doing this like sort of like dime store belly dancer. I had this costume with this like spiral bra,
Right. Oh my God. Did anyone document it?
There's definitely photos and probably some videos somewhere. It was at Theater of the New City in 2008 in the East Village. And like, I don't know if anybody, we did that. The run felt like it lasted forever. It was probably only like a month or something, but it was really like I was there like 4 nights a week or something. And
Yeah.
we busted our asses. And so the Forbidden Zone, it's like this similar thing. Or like anyone who's made comics can tell you, like, I know I said this already, I'm being repetitive, but just that like sweating over something that isn't going to make any money, but it's going to be really damn interesting if the right people see it and catch it.
I'm so glad I finally am spending time with you. This has been so long in the making. But you know what's coming up now?
Well, yeah. Okay.
At the end of every episode, I ask the same question, but I tailor it depending on what we're talking about. So on a scale with BIM being the lowest and boom being the highest, what do you give the Forbidden Zone on a scale from BIM to boom?
I give it 10 booms and a bonus basket full of witches' eggs.
What? Are you kidding me? That's exactly what I have here. See? The witch's eggs in the basket and the 10 boom. Yeah, that's exactly right.
So, okay, I'm right. This is good.
That's why I'm not a graphic novelist. So, oh my God, it was so good to see you, Leela. And thank you for bringing this
Chris.
on.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such a blast.
Thank you for listening to Revolutions Per Movie. We release new episodes every Thursday on your favorite podcast app and additional bonus episodes every Sunday on our Patreon. The show's a completely independent affair, so the best way to support the show is through our Patreon at patreon.com/revolutionspermovie, where you can get weekly bonus episodes and shows, exclusive limited edition flexi discs and records and CDs featuring guests that have appeared on the show, and other exclusive goods sent to you just for joining. You can follow us on social media at Revolutions Per Movie and also find out more information about our various guests in the episode show notes. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week. Bye!